So I call it the practical video, but in fact, we can call this the detailed video, because here is where we are going to talk about how LangSmith help us solve the challenges in the prototyping phase in detail. The practical video will be when we apply all these solutions in a real scenario, and that would be later. So remember, the prototyping phase involves quick experimentation between prompts, model types, retrieval strategy, and other parameters, okay? So in this phase, we are going to test different prompts, we are going to test different model types, but, well, you know that probably we are going to stay with OpenAI, but we can also test, different models, and also we can also check, different retrieval strategies, right? We have been talking about the RAG technique during the bootcamp in detail. So we will also pay attention to this thing, the ability to rapidly understand how the model is performing and debug where it is failing is incredibly important for this phase. Okay, so these are words of LangChain in their blog post talking about the launch of LangSmith, etc. But in this blog post, they are unveiling everything they have learned about the process, the cycle of LLM app development, right? So regarding prototyping, they are telling us, okay, this is how the LangChain team understands the prototyping phase, and this is where LangChain helps the LLM app developer teams. So we talk about the first challenge. When things go wrong during the prototyping phase, how do we identify what is failing? And I told you what we do. We have LangSmith tracing enabled when developing a new LLM application. Okay, we will see what is LangSmith tracing. We will see in the next blog, we are going to talk about terminology. We will talk about traces, LLM calls, runs, etc., etc. But now I just want you to stay with me with the conceptual approach, with the, high-level explanation. So when developing new LLM applications, the LangChain team suggests having LangSmith tracing enabled by default. It isn't necessary to look at every single trace. However, when things go wrong, an unexpected end result, infinite agent loop, slower than expected execution, higher than expected token usage, etc. When things go wrong, it is extremely helpful to debug by looking through the application traces. Okay, so what the LangChain team is telling us is like, you know what? When you have a problem in the prototyping phase with something doesn't work, go to the LangSmith tracing dashboard, check this trace, and understand under the hood what is happening in order to identify where the problem may be. They continue saying, LangSmith gives clear visibility and debugging information at each step of an LLM sequence, making it much easier to identify and root cause issues. So you will see, for example, we will see this in practice. When we are in a RAG application, we can investigate through LangSmith each of the stages of the RAG technique, what is happening there. And doing that is going to be much easier for us to identify where is the problem we may be having. So LangSmith provides native rendering of chat messages, functions, and retrieve documents. We will see this. So, problem. When things go wrong, how do I identify what is failing in the prototyping phase? You just need to have LangSmith tracing enabled since day one. So whenever you have a problem, you go under the hood, which is LangSmith, and check what is happening. Second challenge, how do we iterate and experiment in a fast and easy way? So we will see how we can use LangSmith Playground to iterate and experiment. And you will see that this LangSmith Playground is in fact what LangSmith used to call the LangSmith Prompt Hub or LangSmith Hub or the Hub. So this is an area in the LangSmith dashboard, that LangSmith application platform where we can play with different prompts. And this is not just, I remember when I saw this playground, I thought, okay, we can prove, we can try different prompts here. But it's not just that. You can use the trace in the LangChain tracing to go from the trace to the prompt playground. We will see how to do that. So it's much more interesting than you think. I was surprised by this when I saw this in action with a professional LLM application. You will be surprised too, you will see. So here we are saying that create a test dataset with LangSmith. This is more like the last point. Let's see if we have. Okay, so here this is a change in the proper order. But here you have in the notebook the blog talking about how to use LangSmith Playground to iterate and experiment. So LangSmith provides a playground environment for rapid iteration and experimentation. This allows you to quickly test out different prompts and models. So you will see how. I mean, when you read this, maybe you are getting the wrong idea, okay? So, I mean, it's not as grandiose as it seems from this sentence, but it's very good. It's very good. It's a playground where you really can test different prompts and different models, okay? So we are going to see this later. Remember that LangSmith right now is in the first version, so it is going to improve, and we are going to learn where LangSmith is going, because they have shared the roadmap they are following in order to make improvements in the current platform. So you can open the playground from any prompt or model run in your trace. This is the interesting part. Every playground run is logged in the system and can be used to create test cases or compare with other runs. Don't worry if you now are a little bit confused about runs and traces and LLM calls. It's a little bit confusing. That's why in the next blog, we are going to talk about LangSmith terminology, and we will define all this for you in detail, okay? So don't worry. So we were talking now about the third challenge. And the third challenge is how to compare the performance of alternative prompts, retrieval strategies, and model choices. And we told you that the recipe that the LangChain team gave us in the article is you need to use the LangSmith comparison view to compare the performance of alternative approaches. So this is what they say about that. When prototyping different versions of your applications and making changes, it is important to see whether or not you have regressed with respect to your initial test cases. Oftentimes, changes in the prompt, retrieval strategy, or model choice can have huge implications in responses produced by your application. In order to get a sense for which variant is performing better, it is useful to be able to view results for different configurations on the same data points side by side. LangSmith has invested heavily in a user-friendly comparison view for test runs to track and diagnose regressions in test scores across multiple revisions of your application. So, well, LangSmith has invested heavily in a user-friendly comparison view. I think they are in the first stage, so this is for sure going to improve, but right now it's in a very good shape. So you will see that with the comparison view feature, we can compare side by side different versions of our prototype using different prompts, different models, and different retrieval strategies. So this is interesting. And as you see, it solves the third main challenge we face in the prototyping phase. What about the fourth and last one? How to test the performance of the prototype. So this is where this goes. The LangChain team recommend us to use LangSmith to create a test dataset. So let's see what they say. While many developers still ship an initial version of their application based on vibe checks, you remember we were talking about that. So, many teams are just jumping from prototype to production. They don't do beta testing or even a very professional prototyping phase. So I repeat, while many developers still ship an initial version of their application based on vibe checks, we have seen an increasing number of engineering teams start to adopt a more test-driven approach. This is LangChain team talking. So these are LangChain people that have been observing professional LLM app development teams working during months. And this is what they have observed. So they continue. LangSmith allows developers to create test datasets, which are collections of inputs and reference outputs, and use these to run tests on their LLM applications. So we have been talking about this in a previous section of our bootcamp. Remember, we talked about that we can use good, like confirm data in order to test our application. So we can select, or prepare inputs and outputs that we know are correct. And with this list of inputs and outputs, we can test our LLM application, right? So this is what the test data sets of LangSmith are doing. So I repeat, LangSmith allows developers to create test datasets, which are collections of inputs and reference outputs, and use these to run tests on their LLM applications. These test cases can be uploaded in bulk, created on the fly, or exported from application traces. This is very interesting because, as we will see in next lessons, you can, whenever you are reviewing a trace, or a LLM call or a run or whatever in your LangSmith platform, you can see, okay, this is a good case. This is an interesting case for me to have in my test dataset. And you can immediately include the particular trace or LLM call, in the test dataset. So we will see how to do that. LangSmith also makes it easy to run custom evaluations, both LLM and heuristic-based, to score test results. Okay, so we have seen how LangSmith is helping us to solve the 4 main challenges LLM app development teams are facing during the prototyping phase. In this part of the bootcamp, we have seen how LangChain works in a conceptual way. In our next lesson, we are going to see LangSmith at work with real projects, okay? But for now, I just want you to understand what is happening when you use LangChain in the prototyping phase. In the next lesson, we are going to see how LangSmith help us solve the main challenges we face in the beta testing phase.